Good morning. It's week 6 of the week 8 experiment I started to do. Best week yet. Multitude of reasons for that. I'm calmer, clearer, and feeling more self-aligned. And the way I've lived my life, often I have to work out what not to do first. And even though the first 3 weeks or 4 weeks, first 4 weeks, which is half, have been incredibly informative, they're at a pace that Barton set, 6 days of training a week, which I was willing to move into my discomfort zone and give it a go. And I did diligently for 4 weeks. However, for any of you that have watched the previous videos, I became increasingly disempowered, fatigued, overwhelmed, unhappy, because it got to a point, and I always talk about when I'm working with people, you want to be in the growth zone. So as human beings, we've got the comfort zone, and the comfort zone is where it's all green lights. The comfort zone is rest and repair, in your jammies, at home, with those you love, in a nurturing state where your oxytocin, your serotonin is flowing. So the comfort zone is a very important part of our health and well-being. We have to have comfort, rest and repair as human beings. However, if you live there, there's no growth. So discomfort and growth go together. So we've got our comfort zone, which is what I call the green zone. And then you've got the discomfort zone, which is the growth zone. We need to move out of our comfort zone to grow. And it's uncomfortable doing new things. It's uncomfortable learning new things. And in this discomfort zone, which I call the amber zone, there's a lot of research for all of us, and we've got to find our edges. And then we've got what I call the danger zone, which is the red zone. Now, everybody's danger zone kicks in at a different time, but for many people, they've been taught to override it. And the danger zone is when head, heart, and body get out of sync. When one component of your being takes over and wants to dominate. So it might be your physical body. It might be your emotions. It might be your intellect. So logic wants to overpower emotion and physicality, or physicality wants to overpower emotion and intellect, or emotion wants to overpower logic and your capacity to act. Now, when you're out of sync with yourself, you're in a danger zone and you need to realign. Now, we can still be aligned and uncomfortable. You ask any woman, myself included, that's birthed a child. It's bloody uncomfortable, but it's called a labor of love for a reason, because it's productive pain. It's a part of the process, and you trust the process. You trust the process of the midwife. Barton was saying to me quite a bit, trust the process. And I do trust him because he's an expert in his field. However, there are so many variables as to each person's capacity, and we must always trust ourselves more than another. But often you can't trust yourself if you're disconnected from your body, from your emotions, from your intellect. And so a lot of the work I do in emotional fitness is to make sure and help people learn how to emotionally, physically, and intellectually calibrate. So you are the whole package. So head, heart, and body, you are sitting in the seat of your soul. You know who you are and who you're not. Now, human beings come in lots of different flavors with lots of different skill sets. And whenever I'm talking at Schoolies Week for adolescents about to launch out into the world, I always say, if you think of human beings like you think of canines, we're all different species. We're all dogs, we're all humans, but we have different capacity. So what a dachshund, a cattle dog, a greyhound, a lab, a Rottweiler, a German Shepherd will do in their careers as dogs, some will do better than others. Labs are brilliant at seeing eye dogs. Swiss Shepherds are brilliant for trauma dogs. German Shepherds are great for police dogs and securities. Beagles are great for sniffer dogs. Greyhounds are great for racing dogs. Cattle dogs are great for working dogs. Now, as we move into adult life, it's important to know your capacity. And yes, a lab could train with a greyhound, but it would not ever be able to work at the same pace any more than a dachshund can work at the same pace as a cattle dog. Now, knowing your capacity, and unfortunately, too many of us compare ourselves with other breeds of humanity that are built for different types of potential. So many of my clients that are elite athletes, they would fall into a category, a greyhound, a cattle dog. Their physical portal is their primary portal. Whereas a lab, it's a more intuitive creature. It's operating more, and Swiss Shepherds that are trauma dogs, they're more intuitive creatures. What I'm trying to say here is I am no cattle dog. I am no greyhound. I have never been. And I'm not even a purebred. I'm a big dog. I'm a bigger dog woman, but I'm not a purebred. I'm kind of like a mongrel. I'm kind of a little bit of everything. And so I've got quirky assets and liabilities, but it's important that you don't shame yourself if you can't keep up with a greyhound or a cattle dog. Now, when people go to gyms and get into the fitness industry, often the people that are in those industries and elite athletes are there because it's their natural tilt. They love it, they love it, they love it. And that's wonderful. We love watching the Olympics. We love watching great sports people. I mean, I remember when I saw the Bolshoi Ballet in Moscow, oh my God, I was brought to tears by the physicality and the beauty of the way they move their body. So it's very impressive, but it's not for everyone. We can also be moved with the way a beautiful lab, a seeing eye dog, or a Swiss Shepherd, a trauma dog, when I've gone into Gallipoli Barracks and watched the Swiss Shepherds with the traumatized soldiers. They're brilliant. I suppose where I'm going with all of this is when the lab moves into the discomfort zone, it needs to click back into its truth. And when I hit week 4, I could no longer continue, and I have no trouble with discomfort. But danger, when I'm starting to live a lie, when I'm starting to people please, when I'm starting to move out of authenticity, betraying myself to honor what I think a public opinion should be, I'm in danger. And I would say to anybody, make sure that you're not going into the danger zone. And danger zone is always where you self-abandon, where you do not listen to your intuitive knowledge. Now, you have to have a connection to your intuition. And people that don't meditate and that drink and drug and obsess on dopamine often have trouble trusting their intuition because they're not dialed in, they don't have a frequency. And so I'm also reticent, when I work with corporations or anyone, for that example, that says leave your emotions at the door. Now, it's never good to leave emotion, logic, or your physicality at the door. You're a human being that requires all three to be fully functional. Now, when we're in survival mode, we are often in a very different state of being than when we're actually living. And when we're living, when we're in survival mode, for example, when a pilot's trying to land a plane, or a surgeon's doing a very intricate surgery, they have to blink themselves from emotions that happened with their children or their spouses that morning and get the job done. And it's important to be able to do that in portals, but not to live there. And so I don't ever take emotion out of anything. I try not to take logic out, and I try not to take my physical capacity out, because if my logical brain and my physical body thinks it's a good idea, but emotionally I'm not online, I won't be able to fully show up. The same if I'm emotionally aligned, I think it feels wonderful and my body's good to go, but the logistics don't add up. Logically, it's not a good idea. It's not a good idea to move. And so what I would say to anybody trying anything new, when you're in your discomfort zone, make sure you're checking with thought, feeling, and action. Don't leave one at the door, because you are likely to betray yourself if you mute one of those modalities of your human alarm system. Your intellect is there to help you with logistics, and what makes sense logistically. Your emotions are there to help you. Feelings aren't facts, but they are flags, and they will tell you when you're off track. And so often people discount emotion as being less than, as being flimsy. Now, emotion without intellect and activity is flimsy. But when emotion and intellect, the head, heart, and body work together, you have an empowered human being. So, getting back into alignment with my head, heart, and body has happened at week 4. I've moved back into intuitive eating, which is how I live. And intuitive eating is listening to what my body needs. It sometimes needs to fast intermittently. It sometimes needs red meat. When we're down at the Mondrian, I had like a tomahawk steak in the bone in my mouth. The carnivore in me really, really needed some red meat. Sometimes I need sugar. Sometimes I need to fast. Sometimes I need green vegetables. The irony is, once I aligned my intuitive eating with Barton's training, and also Barton has a beautiful phrase that he says, the poison is in the portion, which is really important. There's nothing wrong with having bread or sugar, but make sure your portions are moderate. You know, make sure you're not binging. And so I've reintroduced, beautiful Lurpak butter on my sourdough, my caramelized balsamic vinegars, my truffle and chili oils. I've had desserts, I've had cake, but in moderation. And the irony is, this week the week before I was 71.6, this week I'm down to 69.8. So my body's kind of found its flow, and I feel like I'm back in alignment, having the wisdom of Barton's training program integrated with my lifestyle. So I feel like at week 6, I'm in the best place I've been. What's really interesting is that I also slept 13 hours. Once I'd made that decision, started to get some rhythm up, on the Saturday that I could sleep, I slept 13 hours, and that my body needed to catch up. So, comfort zone, discomfort zone, danger zone, no matter what it is new that you're trying to learn, we need to get to relax about discomfort. But when you start feeling like you're in a danger zone, you're feeling that you're people pleasing, that you're living a lie, or you're a lab trying to be a cattle dog or a greyhound, you are compromising your authentic truth, and that's not a good thing to do. Know who you are, know your lane, be true to that. Yes, be open to learning and growing. Discomfort is important for growth, but do not self-abandon for anyone. The best therapists I've worked with, and I've worked with a lot of therapists, I've been in clean and sober for 30 years, a day at a time, and studied lots of different modalities of therapy. The most important therapists that I have worked with, and some that I still work with, always make sure they point me back to my truth. Because so often we employ others to create a new truth for us, which they cannot do. It's nobody else's responsibility to look after you but yours. You know how much sleep you need. You know how much exercise is healthy. You know how much food is healthy. And if you don't know, go and learn and get some guidelines and then integrate. Because, and if you don't know how to integrate, if you're not online with your intuition, you're likely to lose yourself in learning a new modality. So I cannot stress enough, your inner world, your inner Wi-Fi, your spiritual practice, which aligns you with your heart's truth, is the compass with which we do everything. And when you are in harmony with your truth, the ripple effect with everything else applies, which is what I found on week 6. I'm in harmony with myself now. I've been able to integrate all of the uncomfortable things that Barton has taught me into a truthful way of living that I can maintain. I've got 2 more weeks to go. It'll be interesting to see what happens in week 7 and week 8. But yes, it's been the best week so far. But lots to learn, and yeah, I'll share it with you as I go. And for all of you that have tracked with me so far, thank you so much. Off to the gym now this morning. I will see you next week for a week 7 update. Lots of love. Bye.